And speaking of brain rot, shifting gears a little bit, but sticking to brain rot, Jonathan Greenblatt and others, Jonathan Greenblatt, of course, at the ADL, were furious that Rashida Tlaib made comments which included describing Israel as an apartheid state. I think, I mean, sadly, it bears repeating that it is an apartheid state. But for anyone who's skeptical about that, what is your case?
No, I mean, if I can say something also
Of course.
about the campaign against Rashida Tlaib,
Yeah.
the Palestinian American Democratic Congresswoman from Detroit. Her comments were pretty tame. She said, Israel practices apartheid. I mean, that's something that is now so uncontroversial that even Human Rights Watch, a big, Western liberal NGO, even Human Rights Watch has admitted it. Even Amnesty International has admitted it. And remember, they're doing so decades after Palestinians
Sure.
told everyone. So that's the cycle here. Palestinians will tell you something. They'll be smeared, dehumanized,
Called anti-Semites.
called everything, and then 30 years later, everyone else will admit it. Except we don't have 30 years now. We the situation is urgent. Enough lives have been destroyed. The word needs to get out that Israel practices apartheid. One of the most extreme, one of the most severe crimes listed in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. The crime of apartheid has been an international crime. There's a convention on the crime of apartheid since the early 1970s, at the height of the opposition to apartheid, white supremacist rule in South Africa. It got codified into international law, and that got reaffirmed in the Rome Statute in 2000. So it remains one of the most extreme crimes, along with genocide, ethnic cleansing, and other crimes of that level. What Jonathan Greenblatt did, again, he's the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, a Jewish communal organization that masquerades as a civil rights group, but is really just an Israel lobby group. I mean, that's all they do. And so he went on the attack and claimed, because what Rashida Tlaib said is, you can't be progressive. You can't call yourself progressive and support apartheid, support the apartheid that Israel practices against Palestinians. What Greenblatt did is he put out an attack that claimed that Rashida Tlaib had put in place a litmus test for American Jews, that she had targeted American Jews and said that American Jews cannot be progressive if they support Israel, which she never said. It was a complete fabrication by Greenblatt. But what happened then is all these Democrats in Congress came out with pretty much identical statements, saying the same thing, attacking their own colleague in what was a clearly coordinated Israel lobby campaign. And that just shows you how much the Democratic Party establishment is still really captured by lobbies, including the Israel lobby. Of course, not only the Israel lobby, but it's one of the major ones, and is so out of step with the base of the party, or the people who vote for the party, that they, instead of defending their Democratic Party colleague in the House from these lies that were being disseminated by the ADL, they repeated them on behalf of the ADL against their Democratic Party colleague.
Trigger warning, it's Jake Tapper reading Greenblatt's comments, but I think it's worth showing the audience.
Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib of Michigan facing criticism today from what several of her Jewish colleagues have deemed anti-Semitic comments. Here's what Tlaib, the first Palestinian American woman to serve in Congress, said at a virtual event yesterday.
I want you all to know that among progressives, it has become clear that you cannot claim to hold progressive values, yet back Israel's apartheid government. And we will continue to push back and not accept this idea that you are progressive accept for Palestine any longer.
The CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, slammed the comments, saying that Israel does not have an apartheid government, and said that she should not be imposing a, quote, litmus test in a tweet, saying, quote, Tlaib tells American Jews that they need to pass an anti-Zionist litmus test to participate in progressive space. Some of Tlaib's Jewish colleagues in Congress agreed. Florida Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz called her comments, quote, outrageous and, quote, nothing short of anti-Semitic. New York Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler, sometimes called the dean of the informal House Jewish caucus, tweeted, quote, I fundamentally reject the notion that one cannot support Israel's right to exist as a Jewish and democratic state and be a progressive, unquote.
So you can just see right there that was, by the way, the entirety, because I watched the thing. There's not like a bit that was left off of what she said. You can see she says nothing about Jews. She says nothing about Zionism. She doesn't say American Jews have to reject Zionism. She says you can't be a progressive and support Israel's apartheid government, a position I completely endorse and that is obvious. You can't be a progressive and support Jim Crow. You can't be a progressive and support any kind of systematic racism. That's self-evident. But the key point here, what they're trying to do, again, just as the previous story isn't about Linda Sarsour per se, this story is also not about Rashida Tlaib. It's about using her comments to try to establish, to try to force this idea that any criticism of Israel and its grotesque and violent and murderous practices against Palestinians, that any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic and is an attack on Jews. This is, of course, a tactic that has been used, sadly, with great success in the UK within the Labour Party, which is, the centre-left party in the UK, roughly the equivalent of the Democrats. And that systematic Israel lobby campaign over the last few years destroyed the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, the most left-wing and progressive leader that that party has had in decades, and who had a real prospect of becoming prime minister, to the point where any criticism of Israel has been crushed within the Labour Party, and they saw that as a success story, and they're trying to import that into the US. And when I say they, I mean the Israel lobby, pro-Israel groups, and their allies in the Democratic Party, groups like the A.D.L, groups like AIPAC and others. And their problem, the thing is, they can pull it off with, the Democrats in Congress, with most of them. They'll toe the line, and they can pull it off with, Jake Tapper and other, what I call U.S. regime media. But what they're having trouble with is that the base of the Democratic Party is done with Israel. And poll after poll after poll has shown that over years, the base of the Democratic Party is done with Israel and sees Israel for what it is. And so they can't win the argument based on merits. The only thing they could do is try to create a taboo where, progressive people or liberals or left-wing people, whatever it is, will just feel like, oh, well, if I say anything about this, I'm going to offend Jews. And then I'm going to be called an anti-Semite. And I don't need that headache. So they're trying to create fear around any frank discussion of Israel, an apartheid state that gets $4 billion a year in weapons from the United States to murder Palestinians and steal their land. They don't want Americans to talk about that, because the more Americans talk about it and find out about it, the more outraged they are.